Mark, Jane and Will have, I'm afraid I've not been there, but they've got an amazing farm shop and visitor centre in Durham. They also farm beef and sheep, yeah. And they're slightly hesitant about, and they are perfectly capable, but they're slightly hesitant about doing a presentation. So we're going to do it this way. So I've got to perform. So they've given me some questions, and I am going to be Michael Parkinson. So just to add on to what I've already said, can you just give us a brief background into you, your family, and your farm?
Yeah. Hi there. Obviously, I'm Mark. Jane, Will's here as well. We have a daughter as well, Emma, who's been in the business. Unfortunately, she's about to go and live in New Zealand for 18 months. I don't know what that says about our business, but that's what she's doing. Hopefully, she'll return. So we farm in Durham, just 6 miles outside Durham City. Probably when you hear people on the phone, they say, we've come to the farm, as though they've driven miles and miles and miles. So we are on a little track, so we're quite difficult to get to, but we're actually only 6 miles from Durham, so that's quite handy as far as the public are concerned. We're tenant farmers, or we were tenant farmers, started in 1992, 750 feet, open cast land, about 80% of it is open cast. We run about 200 Aberdeen Angus cows, 1,600 Clin ewes, basically, and we have saddleback sows, about 25 sows. That's purely to stock our own shop. We wouldn't have nearly as many pigs otherwise. I'm not a big supporter of a pig. Cows-wise, we supply our shop, which we'll come on to in a minute. What we don't sell through the shop, we finish all the bullocks off grass at 18 months old. And we sell lambs whenever they're ready, as soon as possible. We do have to keep both beef and lamb available every week of the year through the farm shop. So that does mean we do keep animals a bit longer on the farm in some cases. We turned organic in 2005 and joined the higher level stewardship scheme in 2001, which we're still in now. So we have done a lot on the stewardship front. The farm, when we took it over, was very badly fenced, so we've utilised stewardship, and we had to do an add up the other day for some carbon thing we were doing, and we've got 38 kilometres of hedgerows. So we've made full benefit of the stewardship system and got a lot of fencing, a lot of hedgerows done. Because we turned organic in 2005, our business is really driven by red clover. Now it's multi-species lays, but it's still basically driven through red clover. I would say that's sort of an introduction as to what we do.
So you've got quite a big farm, a lot of stock. And what made you want to diversify and deal with the public?
So I think we're both first-generation farmers. I don't come from a farming background at all, really, and I think that gives you maybe a different perspective than if our parents had been farming. Obviously, our first consideration was to make money, and we had a big rent to pay. We ended up having 2 tenancies before we were able to buy the farm a few years back. And we wanted capital when we got our second tenancy to buy more stock to fill the farm. We were changing it from an arable farm that we took over into a livestock-based farm. And we had very few stock, and then that all got taken out with foot and mouth. So we had a blank canvas to start with, and that was really at the time when everyone was just getting into farmers markets and that sort of thing, and I really didn't want to feel like I was being left out. So, and my grandmother was going to farmers markets in Ponteland and buying Donald McPherson's beef and raving on about it, well hung and tender. What a strapline he had. And And we wanted to be like Donald. That was what we thought. So, and I also wanted to work on, I'd been working away in Labour, and I'd been working on a farm near home in the office, and I wanted to work at home. So diversifying was one way of doing that. And I think one thing just led to another. We very much were an evolving business. We tried loads of different things. We went to New Zealand after foot and mouth to see, look at different farming systems out there. And we came back and the roof had blown off one of our sheds, a beautiful listed building. And so we got our landlord and a stewardship grant to re-roof that. And then we thought, well, this is too good to use as a wire store. Let's turn it into something. So that's how the farm shop evolved. And everything has just pretty much happened like that. One thing's led to another, and before you know it, you're not only flat out farming, but you're flat out doing everything else. And yeah, so we tried so many diversifications, from Christmas trees, stables, riding routes, selling garden furniture. We've had a Halloween barn. We've had a maze. We've had quad biking, clay pigeon shooting, fishing ponds. Some of the things successful, some of the things not so successful. But we've ended up with a core business now that we have a farm shop, a coffee shop, and the forest adventure.
So the meat you sell is mainly your meat, is it?
Yeah, it's our beef, our lamb, saddleback pork as well. We sell chicken as well, which I think Angus is here. We used to, when he did chickens, we did his chicken. We still do his turkeys. So we try and get local stuff if we don't do it ourselves.
And how easy is it to work with an abattoir? Do you have on-site butchers or?
We're very lucky that we have 2 abattoirs pretty close to us. So every Monday, I take lambs and pigs to Jewett's, which is only a quarter of an hour away from us, and then we take the beef probably every 2 weeks. We'll take the beef to Jewett's as well, and then it comes back to us. We employ, well, it depends whether you call it sort of 3, 4, 5 butchers, depending on who we can get and when we can get them.
So I'm going to go slightly off script now. You came to us a while ago, and Jane said, "We've grown a monster."
Yeah, we feel that a bit.
Talk a little bit about that, and just has it been so successful that as you've grown a monster?
It has been successful, yes, and we've had a mantra that if it doesn't make money, drop it, try something else, and we've sort of got to a stage now where we think the things that we're doing now are successful. This last year, this summer, we built an ice cream shack because we were only selling ice cream out of a little corner in the coffee shop. And I know it hasn't been a good summer, but we sold a lot more ice cream than we would have done if we didn't have the shack. So you can probably, on the pictures there, you'll see the shack at some stage. All those sort of things, we've done them in-house. I employ a chap on the farm, and him and I build most of the things that you can see on the various things. We helped build the coffee shop when it was put up. So we've done a lot of the things ourselves as well, which has made it cheaper. We certainly haven't been a place that has put up a shop and spent £1 million doing it and then going, gosh, this doesn't make money. Well, we've done it the other way around, and I don't know if you want to come on to it. We could talk about the butchery a bit more. When we started the butchery, we were open on a Friday morning, and then we went on a Friday afternoon as well, then a Saturday morning, and slowly we ended up being open until the pandemic. We're open every day. And so that's what we mean by a monster. It was working, but it certainly, it's felt like we've always had 2, 3 businesses running at once. And that's been our choice, but that's what we've created. So there's a downside to it, and that has been that, you know, we've probably been, which a lot of farmers are, we've been guilty of working more than we've been playing.
And can you just give us a few examples of maybe something that really hasn't worked and something that has worked beyond your expectations?
Do you want to have a go at the ones that don't work? Lots of them.
The one thing I really, really, really hate is Halloween. We did have a very successful Halloween barn about 2005 for a couple of years where we had things like a rocking chair that I was sitting behind and I'd pull the string and the chair would rock, and we had witches but yeah, staff always love Halloween and they want to put a Halloween event on every year, and every year it loses money, and every year it annoys me, and every year I let them do it again. So, I mean, we haven't had many disasters, and I think we have learnt to pivot. So when the pandemic happened, instead of closing our doors and going, oh, woe is me, we suddenly became the place where you could toot to the boot, and toot for the boot. So people would come and they'd pre-order and we'd have it ready and no contact.
They would just blow the horn and then they'd lift the boot up and we'd put the food in. And
we were buying lorry loads of pasta. It was just the funniest, craziest time. We've had things that we didn't like doing. I mean, we had the trout pond and all the trout got pinched by the locals, so that was not a great one. We have a lot of, we live quite near a lot of old mining villages, and there's a lot of...
They were very pleased that they liked the fish.
That. The mazes, they were the first in Durham, but growing maize at 750 feet on heavy clay is not easy. And when you're organic, it's impossible. So we packed that in, and that was a really great thing because it was such hard work pulling all the maize plants out by hand. You've no idea. And that was, again, one of my whims. I'd gone on a course about school visits, and I was chatting on the trailer, and this girl said, oh, yeah, mazes are really easy to do. And I come home and make Mark do one, or then two. But they were brilliant because it was back in the days before the internet and everything, and we had aerial photos of this amazing John Deere tractor cut into the maize, and on the front page of the Northern Echo or the DNS Times. And so people came flocking to the farm. That's really what launched the business. And we've done things like that ever since to try and work really hard at maintaining our community. And so every year we've done Open Farm Sunday, which is a really great day. We have an Open Lambing Day. We have an Autumn Walk. We do all these kind of things. And we have been doing, since we went into stewardship in 2001, we've been doing educational access. And if any of you get the opportunity to do this, it's not the most financially rewarding, but I think the payments are great now compared to what they were. I think you get £300 a visit now, which is quite good because they're only with you for 4 hours in the day. But we were up to doing 100 visits a year at one point through stewardship and beyond. And it's been fantastic getting kids out onto farm, and we've changed very much how we do that. We used to have bits of paper and clipboards and march them round, and we've realised that children of any age, from be they 5 years old or up to A-level students, which we've had, and especially the teachers, they know absolutely nothing. And they come with high expectations of wanting to learn about organic farming. Actually, they just need a day in the countryside to take it all in, and so we've really dumbed down on what we try and look at, and it's having a much bigger impact, and that's been really successful. So we enjoyed doing that.
So a quick question.
Yeah.
Sheep, the public or staff or family, which is the hardest on a bad day?
Oh, on a bad day?
It's sheep.
I don't know, probably all of them on a bad day. Well, I've had the affliction that I like sheep.
Do you?
Yeah, I've got to admit that. So I suppose sheep have been the core of the business since we started. We haven't got as many as we used to have. But, so yeah, sheep have, if you want to talk about what's made us the most money, probably sheep. But as I've said before, I'm afraid we don't do it. Apart from probably the school visits, which rub the face, if it doesn't make money, we don't do it. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And we're not really shy from wanting to do that. So I personally, probably my biggest hate is a customer at the coffee shop who sits at a picnic table with a sign on it saying no picnics, gets their picnic out, and then makes one of the members of staff cry when they've asked them to move to the picnic area, which we've provided, but they think it's their right to sit either inside our coffee shop or just outside it and eat their picnic.
And then what do they do?
Want the money back.
They go home. Oh, yeah, then they get a refund.
Yeah, and then they get a trip. That's probably Jane's worst hate, is a TripAdvisor.
Did you know that TripAdvisor is not something you can not be on? So somebody joined us, and I hate that person. We have so many wonderful customers, and it's the best bit about the business for me. We have so many regulars. We have over 65 local suppliers, and they're all our friends now. And we have, it's a great community feeling when somebody comes up to you, but we're now at the point where you say, I don't know how much longer we can do this for, and they go, you can't shut.
Yes, nobody wants us to stop doing it.
No, but that side of it is really nice. Yeah.
So, Will, are you proud of your mum and dad?
I am.
Wow.
There should be a caveat probably that I didn't know I was going to be up here till about 20 minutes ago, and probably why I haven't offered a lot. But it should really be Emma sat in this seat. She's with all her friends on a bit of a farewell. But she's, I'd say, in the last 18 months, 2 years, has been the kind of new energy that you guys needed. She's redesigned the website, entered us into a load of competitions, recently won Small Butcher of the Year, or Small Farm Shop of the Year, and Farm Shop of the Year. Again, much to Mother's refusal to shut the send, I think 2 butchers, Emma and the other coffee shop manager, all the way down to Devon for the award show, which she didn't think they were going to win. Didn't want to pay for the train tickets, didn't want to pay for the overnight stay for something we weren't going to win.
Didn't want to pay for the beer.
Yeah. But things like that, Emma's been great. She's kind of given the farm shop a real new lease of life, and has a real good attention to detail, is a qualified architect, so probably has that IT skill that maybe you lack a little bit, maybe.
I'll agree with that.
But I mean, I'm not actually a member of the team at the moment. I decided I went to uni, did economics, and decided to go do something else for a while. I thought it'd be good to broaden the horizons and not just go straight one, because I don't think we'd get on too well if we went and worked together straight away, but also just I wanted to do something else and learn something and then maybe come back with some new skills or with some new ideas, which again is becoming more and more relevant these days. So I work in real estate and sustainability. So there was, I think Sara mentioned earlier about rooftops and trees and bees and nature-based solutions. So I work in that world, and over the last maybe 12 months, I've really seen those two worlds come into parallel. Those investors and developers that I work with want the things that you guys are all doing. So they're looking so much into regen agriculture, they're looking so much into nature-based solutions, into biodiversity, how can they improve cities and buildings in the same way that we're looking at our farmland, and the same thing. So I can't give an up-to-date opinion of how the farm's doing or how we're doing on a day-to-day level, but I think everything that's been spoken about today is relevant. And I think someone did make the comment that the sectors need to align, and everyone needs to, it can't just be a farmers and them, it has to be a farmers with everyone else. And I think in the next 10 years, that's going to really be a driving force. So hopefully going to be a part of that.
So you don't resent the time that you had to spend on the Z beds in the shop while we were making sausages at 9 o'clock at night?
I feel like it's one of those things that's just almost business as usual. When your parents are doing it full time, it doesn't even register that it maybe they're working so hard. I definitely didn't have an appreciation until I was working a 9 to 5 at how easy work can be. Working from home 3 days a week, it's like, why are they doing what they're doing sometimes? But at the same time, you're at an office desk crunching numbers, and it's like, you see everyone else. My sister makes these amazing reels for the Instagram of like little snippets of every day. of what they've been up to, and I look back at them, and it does give me envy that I'm not there. So I think at some point there'll be some sort of synergy where I come back, but not at the moment.
I'm just conscious of time. Has anyone got any questions for the Greys? Oh, you've dumbfounded them all. Any questions? There's one there. Renaud?
Whereabouts is it?
Stripy top.
Thank you. It's not a difficult one. Do you think if you'd remained tenant farmers, you'd have grown it so big? We've diversified with tenant farmers. We always will be. We have been since 1906. And we farm. My husband does contracting. To be honest, I feel like we just flog our guts out working all the time. We've started alpaca walking. We've done bed and breakfast. We do the school visits, which I get so much pleasure from. We go to care homes with the alpacas. If you'd have remained tenant farmers, do you think you'd have grown it so big? Because we're kind of like on the verge. Do we start employing staff, or is the landlord just going to put the rent up, which there has been a suggestion of? I hope he's not here. I think he's in Balmoral. I think he's at Balmoral. But what do you think that you would have done, grown it?
We had done most of that before we bought, well, all of it before we were able to buy the farm, yeah. And we were very fortunate. We had a 35-year plus tenancy and a really good landlord who was invisible, but he had really good agents. So we were very fortunate with that, but we were still conscious that the next landlord might not be so helpful, and we might have a bigger rent to pay, so we might need to keep going.
I mean, our landlord had the view that if you paid the rent, he would keep out of it. So he let us invest in the coffee shop, for instance, but that was always going to be our building and never be his building. So we were fairly confident that the rent wasn't going to be, it was still going to be an agricultural rent and not what we'd made it into.
I think also, someone else made the comment earlier that sometimes doing things on the cheap, and so you're not overcommitted and you've not put a load of lump sum down. I'd say a lot of the stuff, like you mentioned, Dad, is we've either done ourselves or have done and dripped in almost and seen what has worked and built on it, and we've not almost overcommitted in that sense. Whereas you see some farm shops, they'll build the whole thing from scratch, brand new. It's amazing, but it's a risk if no one ends up coming.
I think he's trying to tell you what cheapskates is what you're trying to say. Recycling's better, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to maybe just cut it short there because I'm just conscious of time, but thank you. Oh, you didn't need to.
I'm the warm-up act and the saying hello. So I'm Sally. This is my husband, Andrew. We're first-generation farmers. We have had a tenancy for 15 years. We're just over the border in the Yorkshire Dales. What do I need to do? Get a bit closer? Is that better? Thank you. Andrew's got a background in farm management and consultancy, and he's done a PhD. I work part-time in the NHS as a community dentist. I'm a specialist in special care. We've come today we've been invited, which is very kind of you, to talk about re-eventing cheese in Nidderdale, and you've had maybe the chance to try a little bit at the side. So I'm doing the introductions, and a bit like a pantomime cow, Andrew's going to do the first half and I'm going to do the back end. And then it's quite a short presentation, but there's opportunity to ask questions afterwards.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Sorry, I don't ask the... Is that, oh, right, okay. So we took on the farm, Lorig's farm, in 2007 on 20-year FBT. We've got a really good landlord who, like the previous speakers, really lets us get on with it. It's very marginal. We have grazing rights with it, peat over clay, highish rainfall, short grazing season, lots of rabbits, limited housing, and about 9 kilometres of walls. When we got there, we inherited a stewardship scheme. We were partway through, and subsequent to that, we put up another 2,000 metres of walls as well. We're bounded by Steenbeck on one side. You can see in the far distance there, in the snow-covered is Great Wern side. That runs to 2,300 feet. Our sheep will graze on there. We do have sheep, but significantly less now than we did 15 years ago. We have now this year, when we took over the farm, we had 15 acres of upland hay meadows in restoration. We've now got 50 acres in restoration, and that's the house that we live in. Sorry, I'll go back a bit actually. So when we took on the farm, I was sort of like a hare out of a trap. Had done farm management, done science, done consultancy, and really wanted to farm. From the age of 5, I'd wanted to farm for myself and never had that opportunity. This was the opportunity. So did it sort of full of enthusiasm, needed to get it out of my system, built sheep numbers up to 400 ewes, hill ewes, and took on 20 Galloway cattle because that's what the stewardship prescribed. Did that until probably 2010, and then started to realise that things didn't do what you'd budgeted, what you'd written down on paper. Never happened. And so in about 2012, we got to the point where we were offered to transition from the old style stewardship into the last tranche of environmental stewardship. So we got a higher level scheme, which was there for a fixed income for 10 years. And Sally and I sat down and looked at each other and said, this is an opportunity that is never going to come across our kitchen table again. And we have to make use of that opportunity and turn it into something that will sustain us beyond the 10 years of that scheme. And so we started to think, to talk, to investigate, to visit, to argue, did we? And to sort of ferment those ideas. And I think that what we learned, and I think, well, I'll come on to that. But anyway, we got to a point really where we actually looked back in time and looked at the parameters of our farm, and actually what we needed to do is create something that was of concentrated value. We live at the end of 3 miles of stone track at 890 feet above sea level, and we needed to. I was sick to death of taking sheep out to sell at the auction mart for less than the cost of production, and then bringing in vast loads of anything else to feed them with. So we looked back at what they did at Low Rigs in the past, and this is what they did, partially. On a subsistence basis, but we wondered whether we could build a product, a story, and mould our farming to suit that with cheese, basically. And this was the vision that we came up with. Using our geography, using the farm.
That's on the next slide.
Oh, is it? Sorry, right. Am I speaking? Sorry. So when do we swap it? When do you do the next bit then?
No, just keep going for now.
No, sorry about this. So yeah, sorry. We set out. So we set out ourselves some goals. We've got the vision, and the vision has been absolutely key, and it still is, to where we want to be. Without that, you've nowhere to go. You've nothing to hang the next project on, or is it consistent with that? So primarily, as previous speakers have said, it has to be profitable, otherwise it's not sustainable. We use the strength and resources of the farm, and like previous speakers said, like Stuart said, some of those what we would perhaps call constraints in the past actually turn out to be to work to your advantage. So where we live, the fact that we live along 3 miles at the end of the stone track is an advantage in terms of marketing when people want to come and visit you, because they look at this place and think, wow, this is an amazing place. How do you do this here? Adds to the story. We've got a history of making cheese. We've got the agri-environment scheme, which I think pays us probably twice, if not 3 times. We get the income stream. We get the fact that in terms of marketing, we can say that we're in that agri-environment scheme, and actually it's also guided us perhaps in terms of I mentioned MSO, maximum sustainable output. Some of you may or may not have come across Chris Clark, who we've worked together with. That it fits in with that. So some of what we have found on the farm, some of our practices are consistent with what Chris Clark is saying. One of the key things that we try to make sure is that and we aren't probably. It's a goal. It's not there yet. Is ensure that the added value is not subsidising an unprofitable farm. That's key because otherwise, why are you bothering farming in the first place? As I say, maximum sustainable output. We stopped using fertiliser. We stopped using largely using chemicals. We stopped using wormers. We didn't use a lot of cake to begin with. We use even less now. And we've maximised the value of what we're selling off the farm. I looked at yesterday morning, in between milking and making cheese, I sort of sat down with a cup of tea and looked at what our financial position might have been had we not have changed. And I think that this year we might have been living off 600 quid. We aren't, I hope, but that's how, and it's taken us 6 years to change, which was a big learning curve to us. I thought when we first moved to that farm, we'd have it licked into shape in 3 years, and we're 16 years down the line, and we're still not there. And then the cheese, we thought that would maybe take 3 years. It took 6, even 7. We want to be sustainable. That means farm, family, money, environment. So we milk rare breed cows. We milk them once a day for 5 months of the year. We make cheese for 5 months of the year. That coincides with grass growth. We don't try and feed them vast amounts of cake. We don't try and defy the laws of physics by pushing in energy that we're not going to get a return on. And finally, and by being seasonal, it means that we can do things together as a family. It means that we can do rugby in the winter, and we can go on holiday. And we can also, it gives us time to reflect on the summer, the really busy time in the summer, and actually plan for the next year and try and make good the things that didn't quite work out. And then finally create employment, and we have done. We've sort of created probably 0.5 to 0.75 at this point in time. We're only really probably halfway along our journey to sustainability in terms of product volume, but I'm really glad that we started, because I think that had we not, I think that at this stage we'd be looking at getting out of farming. Is it your turn now? Sorry. So what does this? So working with nature, we've got all the ground nesting birds that you can imagine, and raptors as well. We've got curlews in abundance. They've had a fantastic year. Lapwings, oyster catchers, golden plovers, snipe, black grouse, woodcock. They're all there. We're creating wildlife habitat with these meadows. The curlews we've seen that, in terms of numbers, not sure, we've only been recording for 3 years, but we've seen curlews, the area over which they are using has increased as we've restored those hay meadows. We find that with restoring these hay meadows, we get that wildlife habitat. We get that consistent yield because we cut late in the year. So it evens out the droughty periods and the wet periods. So we're late cutting. What it does bring, our cows do graze our meadows early in the season and late in the season, but we're also trying to add that biodiversity to our pastures as well. And what we do know is that brings flavour and aroma to our cheese, without a doubt. And that, again, brings consumer interest, which is key.
I think we should swap now.
Okay.
We've only got 5 minutes left.
Sorry.
No, it's not. We're a good team, honestly. So just to add in the things that we wanted to create within the story. So it was understanding the heritage of our farm, of the Yorkshire Dales, and where cheese was made as a routine. You know, cheese is the dairy store for the winter, and there was a big tradition of that round us. But the tradition of cheese making was lost during the war, and post-war that it became a much more, Wensleydale certainly became a much more industrial product, and for us we were wanting to turn that clock back, reinvent that farmhouse cheese. And there was cheese made at our farm until 1962. So what did we actually do, which I think Andrew's alluded to, but we reduced our sheep numbers massively. So we just have 60 sheep now. They're easy care, and they are what it says on the tin. And they, it's not DIY, but they're very self-contained, and that suits the system well. And we changed from the Belted Galloways to Northern Dairy Shorthorns, which are native to our area, and they're a rare breed. And we now have one of most of the Northern Dairy families. They're a small cow, they're dual purpose, so beef and milky. And again, they went out of fashion as everyone committed to one route or another. But they're really well suited to our climate. Neither of us had done anything with cheese before, so we needed to go on a whole adventure about finding out about it, learning how to make it, experiment, make mistakes, etc. And we needed to come up with a business plan to be able to communicate what we were trying to do and go to the bank and take out a loan and do all of those things. But I think the key thing, which, you know, I'm taking a mick out of us with our banter, but it was so important throughout the whole thing to keep talking, and it needs to be, the vision thing is there as a shared vision, and the vision's there particularly on a NAF day. On a good day, it's great, but on a NAF day, it's really important to have a vision to remember why it is that you're trying to do what you're doing and what you're aiming for. So in terms of process of change, the talk's there again. And every year, as Andrew was saying, you know, we're hard at it during the summer making the cheese. We finish as we block carve, and the grass is stopping growing come October time, at which point we do go on holiday for a week, but we then come back and try and reflect on what's gone in the last year, what's gone well, what have been our challenges, what have we learnt, what do we want to change, and try and apply that again for the coming year, to keep that momentum and to keep the interest and the challenge.
Can I interrupt? And that is a semi-formal process. I get sat down at the kitchen table, and we have sheets of paper, and we look at family, we look at cheese, and we look at farm, and it might sound silly, but it works. It really does. It's a great. You might need a glass of wine, but it's a great way to think about, to reflect on what you've done in the previous year. Sorry, go on.
So I think we've talked about the importance of having a vision, some goals, some objectives. And so that's the final slide. So I hope you enjoyed tasting the cheese. The cheese really is reflective of where we live, what the cows are eating, the cows themselves. It's a taste of our farm. So thank you for listening today.
I think in the interest of time, just grab them and ask questions. So next up, so Liz, I haven't heard Sara speak. Liz, I think she met you in the loo at Groundswell and said, we need to have her at Carve on Calling. This is Sara from British Pasture Leather. She's all about leather, but she's all about the whole regenerative story. And over to you.
Thank you. So can I just advance here on the keyboard? Again. Okay, great, thanks. Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm Sara Grady from British Pasture Leather, and my partner in this project is Alice Robinson, who was unable to join us today. And the vision for British Pasture Leather is to create a supply of finished leather made from the hides of cattle raised on regenerative farms. And I'm going to start explaining a little bit about this just by sharing some of my background with you. So I am a city kid. I grew up in New York City with no connection whatsoever to farming or food production. And after many different experiences working in different creative capacities in film and in television and in theater and in art, I really missed a connection to nature. And I knew that food would somehow be the thing that brought me to that. And so I started learning about food, and the Hudson Valley is a region just north of New York City, which was historically the breadbasket for New York City, and is now a region of America that is similar in many ways to Napa or Sonoma or better known parts of America where you think of sort of high quality food and wine. And it is now a very, very vibrant community of diversified farms practicing sustainable or regenerative agriculture. And I found my way into the Hudson Valley about 16 years ago, in the kind of moment when the local food movement was developing in America. And I found myself on a farm that was the home of a nonprofit organization, and basically said, I really want to spend more time here and I want to learn. And they said, well, you can stick around. And I began as a volunteer and was very fortunate that within a very short period of time, I became one of the leaders of that organization, which allowed me to create numerous different programs and projects with farmers and other food professionals in the Hudson Valley and in New York City. Anyway, I'm going into all of this to explain that I was vegetarian from about the age of 13 to the age of 30. Which was around the time that I was getting involved in this work. And I didn't know enough about livestock being raised for food. And again, being a kid growing up in the city, didn't have an opportunity to get different perspectives on that. And it was not until I became part of this farming organization that I had a total change of perspective. And this organization is called Glenwood, and as I said, numerous different, very diverse projects and programs to support regenerative agriculture in that region and food culture. It is a working farm that serves as a training venue for newcomers to agriculture. So it offers a sort of advanced apprenticeship experience. And we were raising animals for food. And I went from being a vegetarian to being an omnivore very quickly because I learned to appreciate the importance, particularly of ruminant animals in a pasture landscape. And the Hudson Valley is very similar to the UK in the sense that it grows grass well. And I felt, well, if I'm appreciating how important these flocks and herds are to keeping farmers on the land in this region where there are enormous pressures on them because of the expenses of production there, being close to New York City and other cities, then we better make good use of all of that animal. And I was able to do that, of course, from a culinary perspective. I learned very quickly to appreciate eating organs and blood and using bones and fat. And I wanted to share this picture. This is a workshop that I developed at Glenwood for very high-profile New York City chefs to come observe a humane slaughter on the farm. And the reason to do that was to instill the values in them of sourcing their meat thoughtfully. And then we would use all the parts of the animal, but the hide would be there, or no one knew what would happen to the hide after we took animals to the slaughterhouse. And so I started saying, like, well, what about the hide? And no one could tell me what was happening to the hides of the animals that were being raised on the farm that I was involved in, or the many other farms that I was connected to. And in the meantime, having a lot of interest in design and art, was querying designers and people involved in fashion. Do you know anything about the source of the leather that you're using or purchasing? And of course, no one knew. So it struck me that if we can go to the butcher counter and say, I want a pasture-raised steak, then some of us might want to say, I'd like to know about the life of the animal that yielded the leather that's being used in my bag, belt, shoes, whatever. So I met Alice, who had just completed a degree in women's wear fashion and accessories design at the Royal College of Art, and she had done a very brilliant project, which was to create an entire collection from one animal. And I realized that we shared a lot of interests and values. So we embarked on this project together, which was to bring distinction to leather that comes from the hides of animals, again, raised to the highest standards of ecological practice and animal welfare. And the challenge there is that in the conventional standard supply chain for leather, there is no such distinction made. Hides are not separated or identified by the agricultural practices in which they were raised. This is a hide yard. I don't know how many of you have been able to explore or follow the journey that the hides of beef cattle go on, but from the slaughterhouse, they go to a hide yard like this. So as you are probably aware, they enter an anonymous commodity supply chain. And so the work that we have been doing is to create a different practice, both in terms of a different supply chain, but also a different recognition and value for the resulting leather. So we've been very fortunate to partner with Pasture for Life. I don't think I need to explain to this crowd what that means, but in terms of eventually marketing and selling leather to fashion brands and designers, being able to give assurance of those farming practices through this certification program is crucial for us. So having identified this as the certification that will allow us to provide that verification, but also tell the story of regenerative agriculture, we're just thrilled to have this partnership and this connection to this community. So what we do currently is we identify abattoirs, that's the orange pin, that are serving multiple farms that are certified by Pasture for Life. And then we coordinate with that abattoir to set those hides aside from the stream of all the hides that are leaving their abattoir. We arrange for the collection of those hides with the hide collector that typically is already serving that abattoir, although it's not always that straightforward. And that hide collector provides the service of collecting, salting, and storing those hides for us, again, maintaining that separation so that we know which hides are coming into our supply. We keep records of the animal ID, so we know obviously the farm sources, but also the animal IDs for all the hides that are entering our supply. And then in batches of 50 hides at a time, we contract with a tannery in Bristol, which is a traditional and historic tannery that uses a vegetable tanning process, which I often have to say has nothing to do with vegetables, but distinguishes this tanning process from the dominant practice of tanning leather, which uses chrome, which is a heavy metal, and we have opted not to do that for various reasons, mainly because it can be toxic and does not fully biodegrade in the finished leather at the end of the life of that material. So This is an incredible place, this tannery, and we have been incredibly fortunate that they were willing to contract with us because similar to the crisis of the loss of small-scale abattoirs, the leather manufacturing industry in this country is dying. And in fact, just in the last several months, 2 more tanneries have gone out of business. So this is actually the only tannery in the UK that we can contract with for a vegetable tanning process right now. That may possibly change if we convince another tannery to do something special for us, but that means that our capacity at the moment is quite limited. But again, we're very fortunate to be able to work with them. They do not typically contract their service. And so we have developed a method with them that keeps our hides separate from their regular production, so we always know which are our hides going through this process. The thing that we do that's different from what this tannery does is that we take the unfinished leather, so this is in technical terms called crust leather. I don't know why, actually. But this is the unfinished leather. It's tanned and it's stable, but it has not yet gone through the last stage of finishing. And we relocate it to a finishing facility. The reason we do that is because the tannery has a finishing facility that produces a more limited range of finished leathers. And we really wanted to push the envelope on the range of material that we were producing so that we could produce leather that could be used for furniture, accessories, footwear. And we take those pieces of unfinished leather to a finishing facility in Northamptonshire that has been incredibly gracious in collaborating with us. One of the reasons that we're very fortunate in this regard is that the father-son team that runs this finishing facility, the dad is, I'm sure, but beyond retirement age, and the son who's taking over the facility is of a generation that is more sustainability-minded. So he puts up with all the requests that we make to do things a little bit differently than how they typically would. And I'm going to take a moment to explain, and do I have an image here? Not quite. I wish I'd brought a different image to explain this. Most of the leather that we use in our daily lives is highly manipulated. So if you think of, like I, for example, have a set of leather suitcases that belonged to my dad, and they are a much more natural kind of leather. I think they were old even when he bought them. So if you think of kind of old leather items that you might be familiar with from some time ago, very often they have a more natural quality. As opposed to some of the newer leather goods that we might be familiar with, which are incredibly uniform and standardized and probably coated with some plastic. And the reason for that is just because our expectations for this material have grown completely out of proportion with what it actually is. So most of the leather that is produced in the world and that we are familiar with in our lives is highly manipulated with chemicals and plastics to standardize it and make it repellent and resistant to water and wear and tear. But achieving that means using ingredients and methods that we're opting not to use. Again, partly because we're trying to produce a leather that will not use toxic ingredients and that will biodegrade at the end of its usable life, but also because we are seeking to express the natural character of this material. And so one of the things that is very much in evidence with the leather that we are producing is the story of the life of the animal. So growth marks, scars, scratches, natural variation. And all of those things in the leather industry are called flaws and imperfections. And we're really trying to upend that mentality and say, let's embrace the natural quality of this material because it shows you that this animal led a life as it should on grasslands, in woodlands, with trees, fences, and also probably was a bit older than an industrially raised animal. Therefore, it has more pronounced growth marks, etc. One of the wonderful things that we have anecdotally observed with the leather that we're producing is that it's incredibly thick and dense and strong, which again makes sense because it means that the skin fibers of that animal are growing naturally and not being rushed or malnourished. And so we have an incredibly strong, dense, beautiful leather. These are just a couple of images of workshops. Well, one is a workshop and one is a factory that took some of our early samples to make a couple of prototypes, just for us to see how well the leather was behaving and performing. And last year, we mounted an exhibition of those products and those objects for the London Design Festival. And there was, as you can see, a range of things, everything from footwear to furniture to a mulberry handbag, a bicycle seat, and then photographs of the process. So most of us typically have not had a view into the leather making process, nor is it often associated with agriculture. So we really tried to make the point that these objects and these products are connected to landscapes and are connected to agriculture because we've created this traceable supply chain. And one of the curious things I think that has been forgotten in our material culture is that leather is a product of our food system. And what I'm really motivated to see become better understood is, and I mean this is not news to this crowd, but maybe in certain fashion circles might not be as well understood, that there are livestock systems that are incredibly beneficial. And so being able, again, to explain in the context of material goods and design discourse that if you can choose a leather that comes from regenerative agriculture, you are doing many, many good things for animals, for landscapes, for biodiversity, for soil, for ecosystems. So one of the things that we did for this exhibition was that we served meat from the same farms that had supplied the hides of these products at a couple of events and dinners. These are a few of the things that were made for that show. Again, these are not brands that are yet commercializing products with our leather, although hopefully they will consider doing that. They are brands that are very interested, so you might recognize New Balance and the handbag from Mulberry. The others are from very well-established British leather artisans. And so we're just at the stage now where we've made enough leather that we can start marketing it to brands and designers. And if they are willing to recognize the embedded value of the regenerative practices that produce that raw material, then we will be able to supply them. And that's it for now. Thanks. Yeah, want me to stay on that?
Well, no, I think in interest of time, we might have to wrap it up there. But have you got a question? Oh, so I always thought you were going to tell me off. So, any questions for Sara? Oh, there you go.
I actually just remembered something else I wanted to say. So,
Now, this chap is called Dusty Rhodes.
hello, Dusty.
Thanks for that, Nick.
Sorry.
Yeah, just wondering how the price of your end product compared to more mainstream leather.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it is, to be honest, one of the challenges that we're having. It's much more expensive, and there are a few reasons for that. One is that leather is highly globalized, and so it is most often produced very cheaply in other parts of the world. And we have made a commitment to produce entirely in Britain, which, if tanneries can stay alive, we can do. The other reason is because creating this supply chain is incredibly time and relationship intensive. So, for the time being, it's much more expensive. I hope it will become more competitive. But leather, a very like cheap commodity leather is already cheaper than a more premium, say, veg tan Italian leather. We're kind of more in that range. We're still young enough that we haven't proven the commercial viability of this. So I'll have to get back to you about that. But I did want to say one thing quickly. We have, in some of our early pilots, taken hides from farms that were interested in receiving those hides back as finished leather to make their own leather goods. And so we have done that for a few farms, and we would like to develop that service. For the time being, we're not able to do that efficiently, just because of the logistics of that. We do, in theory, have the capacity to do that. And so, for example, Claire and Sam Beaumont here from Broomhouse Farm have made some beautiful bags from leather that we produced from the hides of their cattle, and I just wanted to note that is something we would like to do. For other farms that are interested in supplying hides into our supply chain, please get in touch. It will depend entirely on the locations of the abattoirs and all the associated logistics, but it's our intention to build a business model that will give some additional value to the farms whose hides we're using. So we buy the farms from the abattoir as they're typically purchased at fair market price, and then we are doing something that no one else in the leather supply chain does, which is we are voluntarily giving a little more to the farm.
Just a quick one on the business model.
Yeah.
It sounds, it's really
a work in progress.
Yeah. So where are you at the moment then? Obviously, you're having to spend quite a lot of money and do all of this, and it seems that the products are a little way off yet. So
we started with some grant funding and have been fortunate to have a little bit of assistance along the way. We're doing this on a total shoestring, just with our own kind of passion and time, and we've had a few commissions. So right now, where things stand right now is that we have a pretty sizable inventory of unfinished leather while we complete some technical development of the finishing process that will allow us to provide samples and get into sort of real discussions with brands and designers that are interested in it. There's a lot of interest. I mean, there's like a tidal wave of interest from brands that think, oh, regenerative, that sounds good. We'll just make that, use that. And then actually educating them about the material so they really understand it, and also persuading them to pay more is the challenge that we're working on right now. But hopefully next year you'll see some leather goods out there made from Pasture for Life certified cattle hides. Yeah?
You said you've only now got enough, maybe, like you said, you've maybe now got enough hides to be able to start making products. What sort of capacity do you think there potentially is in the UK market, or how many hides do you potentially use over a year?
There's two ways to look at that question. Right now, for finished leather, we are limited by the capacity of the tannery that we work with, and the capacity they have offered us, and that could fluctuate up or down, depending on their circumstances, is only between 300 and 600 hides a year. Again, I have to say, I would really like to see some economic policy or other, government-led or even privately funded support for that industry to develop and to evolve, because sadly, it's dying before it's even being modernized in this country. And so, what I often hear from the gentleman who runs the tannery that we work with is that he cannot hire staff for that tannery. That's one of the reasons they can't produce more for us. And so that's one issue. If we develop relationships with other tanneries, our capacity could jump. And if that happens, then obviously we're looking at the systems for hide sourcing that we have set up. And that depends on a couple of things. One is the numbers of certified cattle that are being processed every year, which, other Pasture for Life people here might have an estimation, but I would say is probably around 1,700 across the country per year, 2,000 per year. Any sense of that? It is, so a little over 2,000. head per year being processed by Pasture for Life hides, but that doesn't mean that we would be able to use all of those hides, just because the logistics of taking a fresh hide to proper storage within sort of 12 to 24 hours means that we need some volume at each abattoir on a processing day. So we can't just always take 3 hides just because it's a certified farm. But if we had those systems in place and we could use more of those hides, then the constraint is what the market will pay for that leather and what the demand is. And I think we will have a few opportunities as we develop this to look at that in different ways, either by supplying raw hides with the distinction of having been, raised on regenerative farms, or by possibly, if we are compelling enough, persuading some of these big brands to support things like certification programs so that we can grow together.